So I want to just start off by asking each of you if you could maybe mention one or two places in the film that most resonated with your own experience.
I saw myself actually about 6 different places in the film where I was physically present. My landings on D-Day in Normandy, Omaha Beach, with the 29th Infantry Division. I knew my friend Hal Baumgarten, whom you saw in the film, landed on D-Day with the 116th Infantry Division of the 29th Infantry Division. I was with the 115th Infantry Division as a combat communications specialist. It was my job to get to the beaches and be in quick touch with the French underground, and also to fire at the enemy as needed. Now, Hal Baumgarten in the film that you saw was very proud of the fact that he was the first guy to hit the beach. Actually, I never told Hal this. It's a secret that I kept, and he passed away about a year ago, so I can reveal that secret now. I was at the beach about an hour before he was. I had to be in quick touch with the French underground, but I was firing at the enemy as needed, and so many casualties, and so much destruction and body parts all over the place. I remember to this day so well. That was my first introduction. I should say toward the end of the war, as we liberated concentration camps, we liberated Dora Mittelbach. We liberated more dead bodies than live ones. At the end, when we succeeded there, Al Ungerleider was our officer in charge, a Jewish chap from Virginia. We set cottage for the survivors, with the survivors at the camp. A very memorable moment for me.
My most memorable occasion was going over on the Queen Mary. And on the Queen Mary, there were 15,000 troops. And we were like 12 or 14 in a little room in bunkers. And from there on, it took 7 days to get to Europe. And while in Europe, we went through Scotland, England, and Wales. We were stationed in Cardiff, Wales, and we slept in stables. Unfortunately, at the stables, there were straw mattresses, and I acquired a case of scabies. My entire body was filled with rashes, and I imagine I was in the hospital for about a week. From there on, we went to Le Havre, France, and that was my first indication of exposure to really what the war was like. Bodies and cold and snow and so forth. And from there on, we started in the Bulge. I was with 1st Army on General Courtney Hodges. And we were in Aachen, Eupen, Verviers, and from there on, I was sent to a rest camp in Liège, Belgium. And there I remained for 10 days. It took a while after Liège to catch up with 3rd Army with Patton. He was moving extremely fast. And lo and behold, before I knew it, I was in Nuremberg. And of course, as you saw from the picture, Nuremberg was one of the largest, if not the largest stadium in the world. And from Nuremberg, we went on back towards, the war was over in May of '45. And from there, we went to Marseille, France. And we had to go through Regensburg. In Regensburg in Germany, we passed a camp with 150,000 German prisoners. thank God. We landed in Wakayama, Japan. The waters were mined and remained there for a few weeks. And from there on, we went to Nagoya. And there in Nagoya, we were stationed at the Mitsubishi aircraft plant.
Germany then and Germany now are two different places. I must admit that when the war was over, I didn't talk about my experiences for over 50 years. Germany now, of course, is very productive, a major friend of Israel, and a place where the memorial to the Holocaust is firmly established. So I guess my only interpretation is that of my own emotions over the changes in history.
I apologize, this might seem like a loaded question, but I'm curious if you feel there are any similarities in today's environment, the political environment we're in right now, and back then. Do you feel it, or is it much different? I'm just wondering if there's any similarities.
The political environment, this is not a fair question. We're not supposed to get into politics here. But I'm sorry, I'll have to get into it a little bit. The political situations with a certain individual who went to Charlottesville and said that the Nazis who were marching there, there are some good ones and bad ones. There ain't no good Nazis then. There ain't no good Nazis now. I could elaborate, but I'll let Bob do it.
Well, when I was in the Bulge, I always said a good German was a dead one. We were for about a week. We slept in the same clothing. Mud, snow, cold, but we managed to survive.
At Omaha Beach, yes, there was a lot of bombing that took place before we got there. There was very few holes in the sand for our soldiers to seek shelter during the landings. That was the purpose of it, to have a place to try to survive. As a result, so many of the GIs, and when I say that, I'm referring also to the Canadian, the French, the British, and the Polish soldiers who were trying to land. It was such a miserable time and so many casualties. I was actually, as a communications person, told to guide the Navy, the naval forces of British and American forces, that their shells were landing too short or too long. If they were landing too short, it was falling in the waters, and too long into the French villages, killing a lot of very innocent French folks. But that wasn't, they tried their best. When we got to the beach, we didn't have shelter. That accounted for the thousands of casualties for my unit during the landings. We just didn't have the shelters. There was no blame game. We're not going to blame anybody. We were just fighting to survive.
I recall incidents going through Guerin and Cologne, crossing the Rhine. Guerin had 150,000 people. It was like an earthquake hit it, devastated. All 150,000 left or were killed. Cologne was in shambles, down to the ground. We crossed the Rhine and we could see ships and boats hanging in the water. It was a terrible sight to see. As far as children were concerned, from what I gather, they would get one pair of shoes every 4 years. I was told a bar of soap would last them a year. And the children were just basically looking for food. Handing out food to them was a miracle. There are so many instances that I could just go on and on and on, but time is of the essence. But those were a few of the incidents that I was exposed to. And of course, Morty's situation before me, and needless to say, his was the same situation as mine, if not greater.
How do you think your lives might have been different had you not served in the war at that time?
During the Battle of the Bulge, I was at the southern flank of that battle, and we were told by our General Guerin, at the Roar River, that there was no retreat for us. It was stand and die. Those were the orders that we had. To try to capture Liège, Belgium, and Antwerp. Liège because it was a primary source of ammunition and oil storage, and Antwerp to serve as a seaport launching site for the Nazis to move ahead into England and God knows where else from there. I think if we had not succeeded in neutralizing that battle, which took about a month until we did reverse it. It could be that our life today would be such that the Jews of the world might be in the same position as the 6 million in Europe who were murdered, and the 5 million non-Jews who were murdered as well for various reasons. I've been told that I've been thanked many times for my fighting days then, saying that there would be few, if any, Jews left in the world, and you figured out where would the Germans have gone from them. I don't know.
There was one incident which I was very happy for. I ran into one of my buddies who I grew up with in Waterbury, Connecticut, Alvin Reiner, and we went to the largest synagogue in Marseille, and I think I davened Mincha, and he davened Maran, and that was one of the most beautiful sights that I have ever seen.
All right, please join me in thanking our speakers not only for being here, but for their great service to our country.